Hey guys, and welcome back to my Let's Play of Sonic the Hedgehog 2006 for the PlayStation 3. Last time we did Team Attack Amigo, which means that it is now time for the final set of downloadable content for Sonic 06. And that is Very Hard Mode. Now there are 3 individual Very Hard modes. There's one set for Sonic, one set for Shadow, and one set for Silver. And yes, you do have to get them all separately. But out of all of the DLC, this is the only one that is kind of worth it. I do think it should still be free DLC considering what it's supposed to be and considering that it's Sonic 06. But you may be wondering exactly what makes Very Hard Mode different from the Standard Hard Mode that you already get within the game. Well, with Standard Hard Mode, you're pretty much just replaying the stages with a few changes in obstacles or level design here and there and fighting a hell of a lot more enemies. Now for Silver, apart from the fact that several of his levels have replaced the Solaris monsters with Eggman's robots, other than that, it is pretty much the same. Although, again, as I've mentioned before, they decided that for the highest difficulty, we're going to get rid of the ball puzzle. I'm suspicious. But for Sonic and Shadow, things do get changed quite a bit depending on the stage. You know, some stages have seen quite drastic changes. Some stages have received barely any changes at all. I'm going to let him go. So it could be the matter of you're going through stages backwards, you're going through, or at least a certain part of the stage backwards. Now let's keep running this time, Sonic. Thank you. Last time, Sonic decided to just stop running. Now I recommend you do want to go quick here because those platforms are technically considered gone the moment they begin breaking, which I would say is fair enough. And this is... now you could have potentially have not known that you could jump on water at this point. And much like the hard mode going against the camera, you can't really see those pillars there. Thankfully they are easier to avoid than the things in the standard hard mode. And that alone, I reckon, is enough to give the Very Hard Mode the title of the easier version of the 2 hard modes. Yeah, as you see, we are going through the stage backwards. I'm pretty sure we could easily have gotten past Tails' section by using the Sky Gem or whatever, but let's do this the right way. So it can be going through stages backwards, dealing with a lot more enemies, both adding extra hazards here and there. And, well, with Shadow, we'll be seeing the differences they make with his later on. And Shadow definitely is the one that lives up to his name of Very Hard Mode. And, well, let's just say if you thought that any of the stages for any of the characters go on for too long in Standard Mode and then even longer in Hard Mode, well, wait till you try Very Hard Mode. Because some of these stages, especially for Shadow, can go on for a very long time. They can go on for 20 plus minutes. That's like a first time in Lost Impact in Shadow the Hedgehog. Only, you know, it's purposely that long. I wonder if using Sonic Sky Gem you'll still find that Sonic is here. I'm curious now. But yeah, sometimes it can mean that the stages don't really look like they're making a lot of sense. Because one thing that we're going to be doing later is we're going to be going through Flame Core. Down I go. Where's that bring me back? Okay. Is that we're going to be going through Flame Core, and Sonic actually starts in the second section inside the volcano, which he proceeds to go through as normal. You're still going deeper into the volcano, like towards Iblis. But then, for the second set, you then go through a portal which takes you outside, where you then find yourself at the beginning of the first section. So you are technically making your way back to the volcano. It's designed like that makes no sense. Thank you for doing that correctly this time, Sonic. But unfortunately I died there, so I need to try and hang on to these rings. Because for Very Hard Mode, S-Ranks, their scores are doubled. I don't know about the others, but the scores for S-Ranks are doubled. So what was once 50,000 is now 100,000 for every single stage. Now for some of them, you can get that score off enemies alone. Not with most of them though. The result being is that usually if you can't, you get some pretty high time bonuses. So if you're quick through the stage, you can get some pretty high scores. Because for a lot of stages, you're not going to be hanging on to your rings for very long. So don't get used to having a lot of rings. And for some reason in these sections, enemies just like to appear. I don't know why, because they didn't do anything. And Sonic can't damage them, and they don't damage Sonic. So I don't know what the point of having these enemies appear is. I mean, these egg gunners here, they've always been there. You know, they're there in normal mode, but I don't know why all those enemies appear when we're jumping from pillar to pillar. Okay, see, these ones serve as actual obstacles. But I don't get what the purpose of these ones are. Because even if you wait, I'm sure you can't really wait. Because all that's going to happen then is Sonic is just going to fall off the wall. So I really don't know why those enemies are there. But the thing about the max speed sections though is... Well, there goes the A rank. The thing about the max speed sections is that they've remained relatively untouched. You know, we've seen that there are some more enemies here and there. There's more spike balls to avoid. But other than that, the max speed sections really haven't seen that much of a difference out of all of the sections of Sonic stages. You can see the size of that time bonus, because they're not going to get a very high enemy score in Wave Ocean. So instead they give you 90,000 points. I mean, granted I was using the red gem. So they give you 90,000 points just to complete for completing Wave Ocean in a relatively fast time. You see, if I didn't get hurt there, that would have been easily an S rank. And it's always 100,000. You see, look at that. 100, and with 300 rings I got 130,000 points. And that was, I think that was after dying as well. So you do get some very high scores, and it's simply because they've increased the amount of points you need for the S rank. So because of the number of enemies you're going to be facing, that also meant they had to give you some very high time bonuses. Not with all of them. You're still going to have to really work for it to get in the S rank and aquatic base, because you're never going to get a very high time bonus in that one. But it can vary from character to character, really. Now, Dusty Desert is certainly one that's seen quite a few big changes, because you'll notice one major thing. We are playing with just Sonic. No Elise in sight. We do still carry Elise in Tropical Jungle, but now we are actually going through this with just Sonic, which means that we have a few more hazards in the way of, we need to try and find a new way of getting across this deadly sand. And exactly how they do that? Well, like we've seen already, light dashes, homing attack chains, trying to use the homing attack as the standard air dash, anything like that, basically. And you will see that there is a rather unusual method of getting across one of them as we're approaching, not quite right now, but we're going to be getting to that one pretty soon. And that's a rather unique way of getting across it. This one right here. See, we have to jump onto this spike trap and quickly jump off before the spikes come back up again. And I think that's a pretty cool way of getting across. You know, that's the sort of thing I expect when I'm dealing with a higher difficulty. You know, you limit what I could do before, and as such, that's what I would call a more creative way of actually clearing the stage. And that's something I really do like, but sadly, yeah, you always clip through that enemy. Sadly, very hard mode I don't think does enough of that, because so many of Sonic's stages are actually quite similar to each other. One thing that I do like, and they do this quite a lot with Shadow, is you actually go through sections of the stages that you originally couldn't go through with that particular character. Okay, I'm panicking. And I think that's pretty cool, you know, because it does mean that you don't actually go through that section that you would normally go through with that character, because if I can think, when you're in Crisis City with Shadow, what you would normally do is after the hang glider section, Shadow would then go off, at first it's the same part that Silver goes through at the beginning of his stage. Or the ending. No, it is the ending. But where Silver would go left, Shadow would go right. Shadow doesn't do that. He doesn't grind around the tornado or anything like that. He actually goes through Sonic's max speed section. The tornado itself is nowhere to be seen, but he actually goes through the max speed section using the motorcycle. You know, that's something different. And that's the sort of thing that I actually like about some of very hard mode stages. There are still times where this does seem a bit weird for Wave Ocean, for example, and I think I did mention this in hard mode. When you're playing Wave Ocean with Shadow, you actually go backwards. You start off on the hang glider section as normal, only with a hell of a lot more enemies, and it is pretty challenging. So there are times where very hard mode lives up to its name, and that's certainly one of them. But then the thing is, instead of them proceeding to a mega section, you actually go back. Oh, for some reason my jump is gimped here as well. You actually go back to a section that you're actually going backwards to the part you just did. So where you completed the hang glider section, you're then sent back to the end of the hang glider section and going back to the beginning of the stage again. Yeah. The hang glider section, you're pretty much going backwards through Sonic's max speed section. Then you get off of it and you're now going forward through Sonic's max speed section. And that is such a strange decision they made there. You're pretty much just going up and down. And thus no progress is made whatsoever. That's such an odd change, and I never understood why they did that. But we'll be getting more into Shadow later, unfortunately, because, well, spoiler warning, I really don't like some of Shadow's stages. I'm still practicing them, and they go on forever. So if you're a completionist, wink wink, then you are going to hate having to try and 100% this DLC. Because trying to get some of the S ranks in these stages, especially for Shadow, is a very long and time consuming process. So you are going to need a lot of patience to get those S ranks. And then of course you still have to deal with the game's other problems, such as the snowboard controls. Come on, Sonic. Let it be said, if there's ever a section of the game in hard mode or even normal mode, if you ever encountered the game's many problems in those sections, you are going to run into a lot of the game's issues in very hard mode. Trust me, that you are going to run into a lot of the game's problems. Such as that, having to try and suddenly jump. I'm stuck on the walls now, and now I have no rings, and that snowball is going to hit me. So you are going to run. So any time that the game seems to really make you suffer and deal with its many issues in normal mode, you then have to deal with a lot more of them in hard mode. So in very hard mode, well, the result is often that you have to deal with. If anything that controlled badly, you're going to have to deal with a lot more. There's going to be a lot more motorcycle. That snowboard section is a lot more difficult. And so on and so forth. But the overall result is that because of some of the changes they made to the level designs, it can lead to some awkward camera angles at times, and one thing that they definitely love doing is giving you some extremely tight jumps to make. You are going to have some incredibly close jumps, so this is why I would really recommend you use the purple gem. But the issue that comes from that, though, is the fact that you think, well, I had to pay extra for this, so why would I even? I don't really want to use my gems. I want to actually make this at least somewhat worthwhile. So you know, you give yourself the full challenge And, well, some of these stages do take no prisoners. And that's the issue that comes from it. There are some incredibly tight jumps, especially in Crisis City for Sonic. There is one particular jump where you need to come from a homing attack chain off some Iblis worms and make it to a platform that is rising up and down and is an incredibly tight jump, and if you get your timing wrong, you're going down. That is probably the tightest jump in the entire game, actually. Very Hard Mode is certainly the best of the DLC, I would say. I know that's not saying much, but it is certainly the best of the DLC. But, by the way, they troll you here by putting the switch behind the laser. I don't know why they didn't just bother not including the, Ugh, I hate that. I don't know why they didn't just bother not putting the laser there, but the switch there, but no, they just want to troll you. And, I forgot what I was saying now. Team Attack Amigo is definitely the best DLC that this game has to offer. But, I know, that's not really saying much. Because, I'm not entirely sure about this. But from what I've heard, this may actually just be DLC that's already included on the game's disc. And all it's doing is just, all you're doing really is just paying to unlock something that's hidden within the disc. And I hate that sort of thing. I could be wrong, because when I look at the file sizes for what Sonic 06 requires, it's a very tiny amount. Which, you know, that's kind of expected, considering that it is an early, you know, it was supposed to be a launch title for the PS3, but it ended up getting delayed. The result being an even worse version of Sonic 06. I don't get how that works. But, yeah, the file size is pretty tiny. I think it's less than half a megabyte. So it's tiny, and the DLC, I think each one is about 2 megabytes in size, so that is definitely bigger than what the rest of the game is, and that's something that doesn't make any slightest bit of sense to me, but I don't know much about how technology and all of this works. I don't know why I'm dealing with these enemies. I could just fly right over it. Like so. Yeah, let's take these guys out. Why not? The door doesn't even open, but so why do we even need to switch the tails? But yeah, so some of these stages do go on for quite some time. And you know, the fact that there are, well, for Sonic 9, for the other characters, 8 stages that have been redesigned in some way to make them overall more difficult than the more difficult version. Yeah, that's at least somewhat worth it. If it is something that is already existing on the game's files, that is something I don't like. Because why not just have it on the disc? If it's already there, why hide it? If it's something that they couldn't fit on the disc, you know, because it was either made at a slightly later point, it hadn't been finished by the game's release, or it's just something that's there as an optional extra, that's fine. But, I mean, you know, I don't know why sometimes you can get a game digitally and you still then have to get the DLC for it. That is not fun. But if all you want is... But if you're going to hide it on the game's disc, that's something that I just don't like the idea of. I'm not saying that is what Sonic 06 does, that's just something I've heard. So, don't exactly take my word for it. But I hear that's what they did, and I don't like that. At the very least, Unleashed. That's something that's separate, because some of those DLCs actually require more space than the actual game does. But they require a hell of a lot more space. The game doesn't even require a gigabyte of storage space. But the DLC, some of that is almost a gigabyte in size for just one of them. Sonic 06 is nowhere near that big. But I really wish they didn't release it as 7 separate pieces of DLC. Because they all cost the same amount. And that's like £2.50, however much it was, something around that. And whatever that is in foreign currency, US dollars or whatever. But that means that you're essentially paying like £14 along those lines just for some extra stuff that in the end really isn't worth it, especially Boss Attack. Again, if you do want to get the DLC for whatever reason, the Team Attack Amigo's alright. Boss Attack really not worth it. This is definitely the better of all the DLC, but again, there's not that much to it. But you know, if you want to try it, go ahead. This is Very Hard Mode is definitely the one I would recommend the most. It's the one that has the most to offer, but you do still have to get 3 of them. And that wraps it up for this section of Very Hard Mode. So I will see you guys next time with Crisis City, Flame Core, and Radical Train. See you guys then.